sound speeds. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I don't normally put microphones in my face, let alone two of them. So if this caused anxiety in me or claustrophobia, then this would definitely be one of those experiences I would not like. I don't normally like having microphones in my face. It has neither one of those things has anything to do with it. It's just probably the boom operator in me liking to have microphones farther away. And for this video, I'm going to be doing it more mass mic style, where you don't know which microphone is which until I reveal it partway through the video. But I do have both microphones, at least to start off with, only about 2.5 or so inches away from my mouth. And the reason I'm doing that is because having them that close gives you an idea of the proximity effect, and then I'm going to back off later and let you hear the way it sounds a little farther away. It is a supercardioid pattern microphone on both of these sides, so it's going to pick me up just fine. And my breath is going directly toward the camera, so I'm going to try to drive it between the two of them so I don't need any kind of a pop filter or anything like that, which would change the sound. Watch this video right there if you don't know how it would affect it. Now, before we get going, full disclosure, CAD did send me the Equitek E-100SX in exchange for this video comparison to the E-100 vintage model. I do get to keep it following this video, but I'm not going to allow that to affect my opinion, which I will share, so you can expect this to be a fair and honest presentation and review. Now, I do feel it's very important for me to kind of set up a little bit about these microphones and how we got from this one to this one. But if you're looking for more of a history type thing, Mike Delgadio's video on the review of the SX is a great video. It's a little bit on the long side because he does a lot of comparisons, and he was really excited about that. And I definitely recommend watching that video because he is someone who uses these for professional voiceover. It's great. Now, originally in 1992, CAD released the Equitek E-100, the original model. This is the one right here. It has a brass type grill. It is steel, has a steel mesh on the inside, operating as kind of a pop filter. And between that, it says online that the steel is more of a RFI, also EMI protection. But honestly, the brass does a great job. Now, they replaced, and by they I mean CAD, in 2003, after running it for about 11 years, they decided to replace the E-100 with the E-100 II. And for 4 more years, until 2007, they continued to sell the E-100 II with very few changes. I mean, there were some changes to it, and I'm not going to really get into that in this video. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it was basically the same kind of form factor. It still had the 20 dB pad on it. It still had a roll-off. It still had batteries, that kind of thing, on-off switch. But then in 2007, when they discontinued the E-100 II, they replaced it with the E-100S. And that changed quite a bit of things. The self noise of the microphone dropped to 3.7 dBA, which was extremely low. And there were some other changes too, I'll get into a little bit later. But in 2020, that microphone officially was discontinued. Now, you could still buy them in the stores. You may still be able to today, but in 2022, CAD decided to release this one, the E-100SX. Now, there is a price drop on that between what the E-100S sold for and what the SX is selling for. And some of the original differences between the microphones we'll be talking about a little bit later in this video. But in short, the original E-100, as it was released, was made in the United States. It had premium parts. It was basically, and still they're made very well, but it was made a certain way. And the the E-100 II started to be made in China. Now, this microphone here says assembled in China on the box, which, by the way, is right here. And I'm not one that normally carries a whole lot of boxes with me when I go places and move or whatever, because I don't really see a point. Most boxes that you get with microphones aren't that interesting. But the interesting ones, like the ones that come in wooden boxes, or like the original King B and Worker B that came in like a honeycomb box with all these really cool things, and this one here that has a lot of artwork to it. This is kind of cool. Has a lot of interest. It talks about features over there, specifications, and more importantly, if you go over here and you open it up the way you would when you first get the microphone, it has information about these microphones and the line. It also has, oddly, it's the E-100, the original version. It has the kind of the wiring diagram and the specifications. What is this? The word just escaped me. The chart, basically, and it shows the way that it connects up. It's kind of cool. And there's that kind of information on there, so I'll probably hold on to this box, let the truth be known. But I'm not going to really get into showing the whole box because there's a lot to talk about with these microphones. But it does actually say, since I was talking about it a moment ago, it is assembled in China. It does say that somewhere on this box. Oh yeah, assembled in China right there. So there's a box. If I wanted to throw it up in the air, I would intentionally make it hit myself in the head. And while some of you may be wanting me to do that, I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the microphones. And the E100, when it was originally released, if you look at the back of it, it has a place for an XLR to come out of the back. It does have a 20 dB pad. It also has two 9-volt batteries on the inside that are nickel metal hydride, low discharge. That means it's going to hold a charge for a long amount of time without discharging. And it's got to be, in order for this microphone to basically, function, it requires quite a bit of amperage. Now, you know that microphones that are condenser microphones usually have 48 volts phantom power requirements. Some of them can require 12 or 15 or 24, but these both require 48, which is pretty standard. But additionally, this one here requires a lot more milliamperage, because not only does it have to power the microphone, but it has to power the charging circuits that also charge the battery while it's in use. And the reason why they put batteries in the inside, by they I mean CAD, is because if you do not supply it with phantom power, these batteries would be able to keep it going for a certain amount of time. There is a little switch on the inside you can switch to have it power down after a certain amount of time, and I guess that's what it's for. I did read about it, but let the truth be known, it's been kind of a while. But there is information about that in the user manual if you are interested. Now, this microphone has a brass grill, and it does have a stainless steel screen on the inside of it, which CAD says is for EMI protection. But honestly, the brass is going to do just fine, so that's really all you need. Now, with the E100SX, you can see through it. It's actually something you can see through as opposed to this, so the design changed a little bit. Not just that, the on-off switch was removed after a while, and that's something that by the time the E100S came around, they removed the on-off switch because it no longer had batteries. The E100 and the E100-2 both did. And the switches they were the same, negative 20 dB pads and a slight roll-off. And although the specifications did change by the time they got to the E100S, and by that, the biggest one is that the self-noise dropped from 16 dBA all the way down to 3.7, which was one of the lowest there is out there. But at the same time, there were some other changes too. In order for this microphone here to actually maintain its charge, for example, not only did the nickel metal hydride batteries have to be high output voltage, but they also needed to have a low discharge rate. And they also had to have resistance to being overcharged. So those three things. And in addition to the negative 20 dB pad, this could actually pick up sounds all the way down to 10 hertz, going all the way up to 18,000 hertz. And there was no real sensitivity spec, even though it did actually list a millivoltage that if you do the conversion on it, corresponds to about, negative 17.8, I think was the millivoltage. And I think that corresponds to right at about negative 35 dB. So you add about 35 decibels of gain, and that's going to get you up to 1 volt. I have to remember here for myself. Watch my sensitivity video if you're interested. And the self-noise on the original Equitek E100 was 16 dBA. And interestingly enough, normally a microphone has a certain amount of voltage it requires, which is 48 volts, sometimes 24 or 12, but it also requires milliamperage. People don't normally talk about the milliamperage, but you have to basically think about power as voltage in amps to create watts normally. And this microphone requires quite a bit of it. It requires 8 milliamps, which is quite a bit if you think about many microphones. Most microphones are closer to 1.5, maybe even like the CMIT 5U is all the way up to 4.4, and that's pretty much the highest one. Now you can get into some higher, power ones. There are definitely some out there that take up to like 12 milliamps, but normally you don't see a microphone that high, one from CAD especially. But this microphone, the reason why it took so many amps is because it was not only just powering the microphone, but it's also powering the recharge circuit for the internal batteries. So it was something that after a while, when they got rid of the internal batteries, the milliamperage could go quite a bit lower. And if memory serves, I'll double check it on the screen right now, but I think this one only requires, the E100SX only requires 1.5 milliamps of power, milliamps. So that's kind of cool. Now the E100S, when it was released, it only had a frequency pickup of about 40 to 18,000 hertz. And the frequency response changed. It no longer was flat with a couple of little bounces up and down in the higher pitch areas. It was basically flat with a presence boost. And to me, I don't really sound very good on that microphone, in my opinion. I sound a little bit harsh. My voice is not overly pleasant in the higher frequencies because it's a pretty high voice, let the truth be known. And if I do talk into a microphone that has too much of a presence boost, I start to sound, like a bird, very, very high pitched, not very many lows. And the E100S also had, as I mentioned before, the low self noise, but it was the first microphone that really in the CAD Equitek line, that was the E100 line rather, that had only a 10 dB pad. So it was negative 20 dB pads on the E100 and the E100-2, and the 100S was the first one that actually had a negative 30 pad. It also was more sensitive at only negative 30 dB of sensitivity as opposed to negative 35, which is what the original E100 was. Now, then came this little bad boy. And so this microphone, as I mentioned before, is assembled in China versus made in the United States. And there's a few differences on this one. You can see through the grill. I've mentioned a couple of things, but there's no longer an on-off switch because when they got rid of the internal batteries, there was no need for it. So the S did not have it. The SX doesn't have it. The pad is also negative 10 dB, negative 10 dB pad. And it also means that, that the roll-off frequencies have been tweaked over the course of time. And let the truth be known, the sensitivity of this microphone is now negative 32 dB. Capsule has changed a little bit. It's now 20 to 18,000 hertz as opposed to 40 to 18,000 hertz on the S and 10 to 18,000 on the A100. This microphone is also quite a bit heavier. It's there's my nose. Every time I'm in here and I talk on a microphone, my nose starts itching. I don't know why. This microphone's nearly 2 pounds. And this one here, if memory serves, is only like 18. And I think the E100S was 22 ounces. This is 18 ounces, which is, there's 16 ounces in a pound. So this is barely over 1 pound. The E100S was 22 ounces, if memory serves. And that's about like 1 pound and 6 ounces. And then this one here is almost 32 ounces. So it's quite a bit heavier. But there's some other changes too that they made. Originally with the Equitek E100, if you look at the back of this microphone, and the same thing on the E100-2, it has a place for the XLR to come out the back, and it has a place where that you could screw in a microphone stand. Right here, you can see on the back. Now, if you compare the back here to this one over here, the E100SX, there's only a place for the XLR to come out the back. Now, the design of these microphones are kind of weird because they're very heavy on the bottom and they're also kind of back-weighted. The original Equitek E100 did not come with any kind of a suspension in it. It was just the microphone itself. You could get an optional this design here of pop filter, not pop filter. What am I saying here? Shock mount, where it bounces back and forth like this. But if you notice, this one actually here has one that it came with. So at the price point, you get not just the microphone, you get the shock mount as well. And that's actually integrated now. You no longer have the internal batteries, but then in all honesty, why would you really need to have a self-powered microphone when you're going to plug it up to something that has 48 volts phantom power? And you don't really need to have that extra milliamperage anyway. So that's a little bit about the background of these microphones. Now, speaking of back, I'm going to back up just a little bit so that way you can hear the way these microphones sound a little farther away from me. Right now, we're probably about 6 or so inches away. I'm not going to do a spin around so you can hear off axis. If you're using these microphones in something like a treated space, which there is, treatment all around me, watch my new Studio version 3 video if you are not familiar with my layout here, which the only difference is this panel is a little bit farther around to the side. But right now, I'm about 6 or so inches away from these microphones in a fairly treated environment. And if I back off a little bit more, these super cardioid pattern microphones are going to be picking me up just fine a little bit farther away. Now I'm probably, what is this, about 9, maybe 8 inches away. I'll back up to closer to a foot. Now remember, I'm not doing anything when I do my reviews and comparisons on microphones. I don't do anything to them in post. All I am going to be doing is simply leveling them in post. Now what I will do is rotate them a little bit more facing my mouth so that way they're still in alignment with me. And now they're probably about 9 or so inches away. They're still even with me. If they look off center at all, that's because the camera is actually about this high. It's a little bit higher than me looking down, so that way I wouldn't be obscuring as much of my face with the microphones as I was doing this video. But as I'm looking at them, they're both very pretty microphones. This one's heavier, obviously, and the dimensions are a little bit different, and I do like both of them. And the big question that I have here is old school microphone, could be up to 30 years old, versus new school microphone, which has a 2-year warranty. If you have a preference on the two microphones, then you might have a difficult time finding the E100, because after Booth Junkie's original video, it has been it drove the price of the original vintage Equitek E100 up. So sorry, but that's the reality of it. And in many, and sometimes off and on, like right now at the time of this video, we're in a part shortage, so it may be more expensive for you to find the vintage microphone because they're expecting the vintage price to go up, because people are going to be wanting to try to buy one of these as opposed to buying a new one, perhaps, because they're like, well, geez, I'll get a vintage one if it's still working, because why do I need to spend the extra money on something that's probably going to have the price jacked up due to the part shortage? Not necessarily the case, but that's the mentality a lot of people will run into. They'll buy something more vintage, something older, as opposed to having an increased price on something that's brand new during something like a part shortage. I'm going to back up a little bit more just to give you an idea of the way this thing will sound a little farther away. Now I'm about 1 foot away from these microphones. And again, I'm not doing anything special in post except bringing the level up and leveling them. So that's what we are dealing with right now, is leveled audio between these two E100 Equitek microphones, the E100 and the E100SX, which, by the way, the E100SX is microphone number 1 and the E100 is microphone number 2. So let's go ahead and do that reveal right now and let you guys hear the way it's going to sound. The rest of the time with the flip-flopping on the screen telling you which one is which. Now, I'll be honest with you. I personally like the way the E100 sounds, and that's the reason why I've used it very commonly in my recording space as the microphone that's been there for most of my videos. When I moved into my new studio, the microphone I was using, the very small one, the the T-Bone SC400, that microphone had developed a rattle, and until I took it apart and fixed it, I was using the E100. And then after that, I was like, man, I really do like the way the E100 works. The super cardioid pattern really works well for me, even when it's a little bit farther away. And I need to do a video probably talking about more of microphone placement at your desk. I'll probably do that sometime soon. But having the E100 at my desk with a super cardioid pattern as opposed to a cardioid that picks up more full sound closer, but in a treated environment, really, you know, if it's a desk and you're typing and stuff, you don't really need to have as much fullness as you need to reject out some of those sounds. And since and the sensitivity doesn't really matter either, because you're going to be fairly close to it. And I do like to have the Equitek E100 at my desk, but honestly, I'm going to be converting over and trying the E100SX for a while. That way it's going to be on top of my boom arm over there. So that way I can play with that one and really experiment with it. I do love the Equitek line. I do love the sound of it. And let the truth be known, the SX is a return to more of a flatter type pickup. So if you look at the specifications, you look at the frequency response and the pickup of the SX, it's more flat, like the Equitek is, the original Equitek. Not more like the SX, or the original S100S, where it was flatter with a presence boost. This is more of the original type Equitek type pattern. But the thing about it is that you need to keep in mind also is that the other specifications do matter as well. The capsules are different, the circuitry is different, the design of it's different, all that kind of stuff does change the way the thing sounds too. Not just the made in America versus assembled in China thing, but also the components that are used. One of them is 30 years old. Is there any damage done to it? Or is it holding up pretty well? Old school, great stuff. New school, still great stuff, but it's made differently. So being that it's a different model and it's a different design altogether, which do you like the better of? Personally, I do love, and probably from using it for the past 5 years, I do love the E100. I do like the detail in the SX as well, and it's kind of a judgment call for me. Both of them are very, very good. If I were trying to buy a microphone brand new and I were watching that Booth Junkie video and I looked at the SX as available and I looked at it and said, geez, which one would I get? I might opt for trying to get the E100 if I could get my hands on it, because I know that if it's can survive for almost 30 years, then I would probably not kill it. But then if I couldn't find one, I would have no problems getting the SX, because if I were starting off this channel now in 2022 as opposed to back in 2017, then I would probably get the E100SX if I couldn't get a hold of the E100. I do still like the E100 and the sound of it. And the E100SX is also a very good sounding microphone. I like the sound. It's not that much different in my opinion. I do like what CAD has done with the Equitek line. So either one of them really is a suitable fit for me, I think, because they're both relatively flat and the specifications are pretty good. Even if the self noise is no longer 3.7 dBA on the SX, which is, it's now 9.5. They still kept it lower than the 16 dBA of the Equitek E100, but it's still very low. I mean, it's still definitely what you would expect to be from a voiceover type microphone in this environment. So what do you think? Tell me in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are. I do like the sound of it. It's one of those really weird things where when I listen to myself and I flop back and forth between the two of them, I'm almost like, well, I like this one and then I like this one. I like this. Here's the thing. I like detail type microphones. I like them to be relatively flat on my voice. I don't want to hear embellishments and stuff like that. And neither one of these microphones really do that. And they are both very detailed. In post, what I'll do is put my preference between the two microphones right here on the screen after listening to this video and editing it. So you can see my preference of which one I would probably buy if I were starting this channel new right now on the screen. See, there it is. Thank you for tuning into this episode of SoundSpeeds. Be sure to tune in the future for more microphone comparisons, blind or not, masked or not rather. And of course, my thoughts and opinions coming at you like a spray cannon. And of course, more sound advice. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.